Hi there. Hope you're doing really, really well. It is Monday, and I'm back from some days out of town. And as I guess I kind of expected, I didn't produce any content during those days. I'm always thinking like I might do something, but I didn't. But anyway, lots and lots to talk about. I think that there'll be a lot of value for you in this episode. Um, we're going to just start off with Gabrielle, who has a sounds like pretty classic psychophysiological insomnia, which is like insomnia. Um, we have somebody with hypnic jerks. We have a whole bunch of things really. So let's just start. And before we do, as always, nothing here is medical advice to anyone, just general thoughts and general advice that I hope will be helpful to the person that wrote me an email or comment, and anybody else that is tuning in as well. So that said, I really want to start actually with one of the more recent comments, and this is on a comment on Insomnia Insight number 255, and it is from Gabrielle. 13 hours ago, she wrote the following. My insomnia started after having a baby. I was worried I'd never sleep again with having a newborn. My baby is a great sleeper. And when I could finally start sleeping again after the first 6 weeks, when he started sleeping through the night, the fear of now that I can sleep, what if I can't fall asleep and I'll never sleep again? Question mark. That started the cycle of my insomnia. Sometimes it takes me 2 to 3 hours to fall asleep, but once asleep, I get 5 to 6 stretches straight lately some nights. I used to be broken, but I feel like it started to improve. Is it mental? Question mark. No underlying health issues besides being a new mom. LOL. I can email you my sleep log if you need. I'm doing CBT, but not recovering as of yet. I just don't want to fear not being able to fall asleep. I sleep on the couch, and when I get into bed, it's like I can't settle back down. Help! Exclamation mark. And all of this is a fairly brief message. And by the way, there is one more thing. I said that I would reply, and then Gabrielle said, awesome, what time will it be? Also, will it go away once I get over this fear and change my thinking? LOL again. We will get back to that in a second. So although a fairly brief message here, I think it illustrates a lot. And I think I started one of the other episodes in this way too, but I think it's really helpful. So it doesn't hurt repeating the 3P model, which I think is so important. 3Ps. Can't believe I'm blanking out on this one. I say this all the time, but predisposing factors, precipitating factors, and then perpetuating factors. So what are those? Well, some people are more predisposed than others. If you are a little bit high strung, if you're a little bit tendency to worry, you're kind of type A personality, you're an overthinker, you're overanalyzing, you're very conscious about your health, you're a night owl, you're an early bird. One of those things makes you a little bit more predisposed towards, at some point in your life, having trouble sleeping. But there are millions of people out there with like many of those predisposing factors that sleep well. So that doesn't mean anything by itself. There needs to be something precipitating the insomnia. Sometimes we know what it is. Sometimes is we have no clue, but something, precipitates insomnia, like having a baby, for example, or could be anything. Could be coming off a medication, starting medication, a health scare, losing a job, getting a new job, traveling, returning from traveling, like it could be anything. Anything can throw off your sleep, right? And that precipitating factor is something also we cannot control, things that happen to us all the time. And having less sleep during a time of stress is normal. That's completely normal. The third P, the reaction to it, the perpetuating factors, is what really is important. That's when we, part of our brain identifies that, whoa, you're not sleeping. This is a health threat. You got to do something about it. That starts, a process of, thinking about sleep, worrying about sleep, trying to do things, all that kind of feed the fear, creates more trouble sleeping, creates more efforts, more things we do to try to sleep, and that creates the cycle of chronic insomnia. So in light of what Gabrielle here wrote, you can tease out some things like, my stomach started after having a baby. I was worried I'd never sleep again with having a newborn. My baby's a great sleeper, and when I could finally start sleeping when he started sleeping, I thought, now that I can sleep, what if I don't? So already at the outset, it seems like there was this worry. Maybe you, Gabrielle, are a little bit tendency to worry, like maybe like that. Maybe you have that predisposing factor. You had a baby, and you then somehow what happened after that was maybe the precipitating factor, and then your reaction to it now has become the perpetuating factor. So what, so let's go over some specific questions or some thoughts here. First of all, one of the questions here is like, is it mental? And a very, very common question. A lot of people with insomnia feel like there has to be something physically wrong with me, like a neurotransmitter that isn't right, or a hormone that's out of balance, or something that's broken in my sleep. Maybe I haven't slept so long that something is damaged in my brain. Maybe some neurons that regulate sleep died, or something like that, which doesn't happen. Like, that does not happen. You cannot lose the ability to sleep. And I used an analogy that somebody liked the other day, which was, I think it was Daniel who liked this one, but you can hold your breath for only so long. You can't really damage yourself by holding your breath. Similarly, you can't do damage to yourself by going through long stretches of time where you don't sleep. So in a way, yes, it is quote unquote mental. Insomnia is, in my opinion, in my experience, always, well, sometimes you can have terrible habits. That can happen too. But short of that, almost always there's a component of hyperarousal where you're kind of like on edge, you're tense, you're thinking about it, you're worried about it, or you're frankly just all out anxious about it. That is the driving factor. So, and that is like part of our, mental state. So I'd say, yes, it is mental. Now, very happy to hear that you're doing CBT, not recovering as of yet, but you said something important here. It started to improve. And I'm super, super glad that you wrote this, because that, once we start even the smallest little sign of improvement, that's something to really hang on to tell people about, to play up, because that's how regaining sleep confidence starts. Insomnia doesn't start overnight. Well, there can be a particular night that's the trigger, but then the whole kind of belief system and all the efforts and all the things we do and all the thoughts and emotions that get associated with it develop over time. Similarly, getting past insomnia is also a process that is kind of an unwinding process, meaning somebody that hasn't had any trouble sleeping, something happens that is kind of an instigator, and then they try something, then they try something else, and it becomes like a spiral. Well, getting past something is kind of like spiral backwards. So whenever something good happens, then if we hold on to that, then that builds a little bit of sleep confidence. Then a good thing happens, then it builds more sleep confidence, then another good thing happens, and then you unwind the entire thing. So super good that you are noticing improvement and really hold on to that. And you started doing CBT, but you're not recovering as yet. Maybe the improvement you've seen is because of the CBT, which then signals keep going and you will see more. I don't know how long you've been doing the CBT, but it often takes at least several weeks before you really, really start seeing improvement, like really tangible improvement. And knowing that you do that, you're doing CBT, I don't think we need to go into the technicalities of that, which we'll probably do later in this episode. But finally here, will go away once I get over this fear and change my thinking? Absolutely. Like, if somebody, you pointed out like something that's super, super basic, important here, which is the fear of losing sleep is like such a huge driving force for insomnia. Once nobody is no longer afraid of losing sleep, then it's almost impossible to have insomnia, because if you're not worried about not sleeping, you will sleep. So yes, once somebody gets over their fear and change their thinking and actions and behaviors, etc., insomnia goes away. Hope this was helpful to you, Gabriella. And I think I said Gabrielle up until now. It's Gabriella. Gabriella, I hope this was helpful to you. Please leave another comment if you have any follow-up questions. And by the way, for anybody that's listened to this and we go through this episode and like, whoa, Daniel didn't reply to me, then please send me an email or another comment, because I know I missed some comments last time and I don't want to do that again. But if I do, please remind me. Okay, cool. So with that said, let's actually go through the comments here. And I feel like I checked this and I was going to start here. Yes. This is a comment on Insomnia Insight number 120, and it's by Crazy Boy TX from 4 days ago. And let's see here. Yeah. So the comment is the following. And by the way, this episode is about like twitches and jerks that happen as you're just about to fall asleep. Hypnic jerks, and a little bit, I kind of expanded on the topic of hypnic jerks in that video. And so the comment is as follows. I first noticed these jerks back in August and had 2 bad ones and kept repeating when I was falling asleep. Of course, that got me very hyper aware that they're happening, and the insomnia started. I kept telling myself they're not a big deal, but they kept happening. My mind is now very aware of them now, and they've gotten more active because my sleep is now bad. What I don't understand is I don't have stress. I didn't have stress, rather, before they started. And then I commented and said I would make this reply Monday, and then Crazy Boy said, the doctor put me on Zoloft, and now I don't sleep at all. I don't think Zoloft is helping. All right, so a couple of things here. Number one, super, super important. Crazy Boy TX is sharing with us that he or she, I don't know if this is he or she, I'm just going to say he because it says boy in there, he is not stressed. And when somebody tells me that, like, I'm not stressed, I'm not anxious, I just can't sleep, or these weird jerks or twitches are happening to me, that signals hyperarousal. Meaning, hyperarousal, I guess it's kind of like an umbrella term actually for stress, anxiety, and being worried. They're all like, your nervous system is kind of a heightened alert status. But the thing with hyperarousal is that can be super subtle. People can be hyperaroused, but literally not feel a thing. So it feels like you're in your complete normal state of, mind or whatnot, but you're a little bit hyperaroused. And that often creates this insomnia that seems very, very bizarre. You just can't sleep and you don't know why. But if you really, really kind of query yourself and think about it, you are a little bit worried. If you weren't worried at all, then you probably wouldn't even leave this comment, to put it that way. So there's some degree of worrying probably going on. And that hyperarousal is, the way I picture it is like a brain, literally like a brain that, if it was in kind of normal state, quote unquote, and you touch it, like not much would happen. But if it's hyperaroused, you touch it and it kind of like, reacts, kind of moves a little bit, or like this electricity is going on. And that's the way I think about hyperarousal. And hyperarousal very, very commonly causes these things that seem very bizarre, like a twitch, a tingle, a jerk, and what else? Like a weird tension. A lot of those kind of like bizarre, like a bit strange things. And now, I feel like they are like insomnia in a micro version of insomnia, meaning like the more attention they get, the worse, the stronger they become. Just like insomnia, the less attention it gets, it kind of loses its strength. Now, how do you do that? How do you pay less attention to something when part of your brain is like telling you to the opposite? Like part of your brain is like, something is up. This is weird. You have to do something about it. Then how do you kind of counter that? Well, the best thing I've come up with is really just distraction, meaning like do things that are that you enjoy and that are like have nothing to do with sleep, and keep yourself busy with those things. I think that can help. Now, I want to share something that I thought about and I haven't said before, which is these, like, the good news I feel with hypnic jerks and these twitches, etc., is that they tend to burn out, in my experience, faster than insomnia itself. Meaning, insomnia people can have had for decades, but you rarely hear somebody say, "I've had these hypnic jerks for more than a couple of months." And I believe that is because you can't really avoid them. Like, when you go to bed, like, you can do a lot to try to avoid a stressor, but you can't avoid these hypnic jerks because you have to go to bed at some point, and that's when they happen. And now the quote unquote good thing with this is that you're exposed to them, and after a while you notice that, well, they're happening, but that's about it. Like, nothing bad came out of that. And I believe that because you can't escape them and you're chronically exposed to them, they eventually see nothing bad happens and your hyperarousal goes away and they go away. So I believe, like, a little positive here is that these jerks and hypnic jerks, etc., typically I haven't come across that they last for that long. And now back to the comment on the Zoloft here. Here's my take on medications in general. When it comes to sleep, medications can, like, Zoloft is not a typical, like, sleep aid, but I've seen it prescribed for sleep, so nothing that's unusual about that. But sleep aids typically are sedating. They take away a little bit of kind of the stress, anxiety, and then they allow us to sleep, but they can't produce sleep. No medication can produce sleep. Now, expectation, on the other hand, can work two ways. Like, if we really believe something, anything is going to make us sleep, then it can do that, because it the belief kind of takes away tension, and then it allows our body to sleep. But if we're kind of skeptical, if we're like, we're not really sure if this will work or not, then it often goes in the other direction. Then we're, like, monitoring. We take, let's say, just for argument's sake, that somebody like that you or anybody else was prescribed Zoloft, didn't really believe that was going to help, but it was, like, kind of curious and maybe thought it could help. You take it, and then you go into this state of, I took it half an hour ago, I still feel the same. Let's see what I'm going to feel like in 20 minutes. We'll still feel the same. Actually, I don't feel sleepy at all. I don't think this is working. Maybe it'll work later on, but it doesn't work now. What if I took half of it? Or maybe I should take double it. What if it doesn't work tomorrow? What if I can't come off of it? What if, you know what I'm saying? It leads to self-monitoring and actually increased hyperarousal, because you're now kind of checking to see how it works. And often it can do the opposite. Like, I think things can go, it can really cause insomnia. So just a comment on that. I hope that helped. Crazy Boy TX. And I think there was somebody else that asked about the same thing, actually. We'll get to that in a second. But first, a comment from Diego. And this is on Insomnia Insight number 257. And let's read this from 4 days ago. Hello, I have a question. I'm super new to the insomnia thing, only started 2 months ago. I noticed even though I've been sleeping better lately, I don't have the same old sleep strength that I had, where it would literally be a struggle to stay awake. Now, even though there's some slight sleepiness, I have to make the conscious decision still to go to bed. Will I ever go back to the old me, or should I just make my peace with what I have now? Really, really good question there. Firstly, very happy that you're new to the insomnia thing. I hope you will be past it very soon and never have any trouble sleeping. Of course, I started 2 months ago, which it's for many on this channel, I will of course tell you that they've had trouble sleeping for much longer, and I'm really happy you landed here, because the less time you spend having trouble sleeping, the better, the easier it becomes to get back to baseline. And you've already started the path. You're sleeping better lately, which is fantastic. And as I said before, like, focusing on that positive, always really, really good. Now, you don't have that sleep strength where it would be struggle to stay awake. Well, I believe what often happens is the following, that you have, like I already talked about a couple times in this episode, you may not feel overtly like anxious or stressed or worried, but you may just have that little hyper arousal. You're a little bit hyper aware. You are kind of a little bit on edge. You're monitoring what's going on, which is kind of completely normal because you had trouble sleeping. Your brain is kind of like, it's getting better, but you're still kind of trying to figure out what it is. You're a little bit on edge, right? And that hyperarousal can prevent you from feeling the full sleepiness that you did before. That, I think, is a very likely scenario. Now, the question is, will I ever go back to the old me? Or should I just make peace with what I have now? Well, here's the thing. Here's the funny thing with that, is that I think if you make peace with what you have now, you will go back to your old self. Meaning, the more we kind of accept that, okay, that's the way that things are now, I'm not going to pay more attention, I'm going to be happy with what I have, that can really decrease hyperarousal and you go back to baseline. So basically, I feel that there's absolutely zero reason to believe that you are not going to go back to the way things were. But paradoxically here is like, the more you try to get back to the way things were before, the more things you try, the longer it probably was going to take. So yes, if you just kind of accept the way things are, don't think about it, go on with your life, do your thing, I believe the faster you'll go back to your baseline. That's really fun. Fun to answer this question, Diego. That's a really nice one. And by the way, since we are here, another amazing comment from Ellen on the same episode, 257. I encourage everyone to read this. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but she says, recovering from insomnia is in a way like the Kubler-Ross, like the stages of grief. The first stage is striving for better sleep than you've ever had because you're so worried, you're feeling so raw, and you lost so many hours of sleep that only perfect sleep will do. And she goes on to say about like when you have that you really want to get like really good sleep, then that becomes like really hard. But then when you kind of like go into further stages, you kind of bargain and accept that you can manage with less sleep, and kind of in a way, the more your expectation decreases, the better your sleep gets in a way. And I think it's very, very insightful, this comment. And I believe it is true, absolutely true. It's just hard I have to really think about how to best implement that in reality, because it's really hard to tell somebody that basically, just decrease your expectations. That can make it feel so like, that's not very inspiring, but I think there's so much truth in that. So paradoxically, kind of like when you lower expectations, you can actually sleep really well. So really good comment. Please take some time reading that. Okay, cool. Now let's go on to this one. It's from Insomnia Insight number 22 from way back when. And it's, the title of that episode was, "Is resting in bed better than nothing?" And Carolina wrote the following. "When you have insomnia, you're always sleepy. So when you're lying in bed desperate to get some sleep and it doesn't happen, you're tired all the time." That's true. Now, interesting thing here is that, when you have insomnia, you're always sleepy. Maybe not. Meaning, almost everyone, most people, let me say that, most people with insomnia are tired during the day because, you've not gotten that nice solid chunk of sleep. Now, there are a lot of people, though, that are not tired at all. Ellen, that we just talked about, had this, which is not uncommon also, that you don't sleep well, but you feel like you have a lot of energy actually during the day. It's bizarre, like you're never tired. And those are the people that have a lot of that hyperarousal. But yeah, most people with insomnia are definitely tired. sleepy, as in like falling asleep easily, like taking a nap easily, not as common. I would say if I saw somebody that was like really sleepy, like somebody that fell asleep like unintentionally several times during the day and had no problem taking a nap, I would say maybe this is something else going on here rather than just like what I call insomnia, like the insomnia triggered by like stress, worries, anxiety, bad habits, and stuff like that. Maybe that's somebody that has like sleep apnea or something like that. But here, I'm kind of drifting off topic here. What is described here by Carolina is a typical insomnia thing, meaning like when you're lying in bed desperate to get some sleep and it doesn't happen, you're tired all the time. And now, here's the thing. Insomnia is so much, as we talked about already, is to such a great extent driven by the fear of losing sleep. When we're fearful of losing sleep, it becomes almost impossible to get sleep, because when you are about to go to sleep, when you're hoping to go to sleep, your mind goes into that state of like, let's see what's going to happen. Oh, I hope I get some sleep. Oh, please get some sleep. Am I sleepy? Did I feel sleepy? No, it wasn't that. What happens if I, etc. Right? So the fear of losing sleep is a big one. And a classic insomnia thing is like when I'm watching TV in bed, I can't keep my eyes open. But as soon as my head hits the pillow, I feel wide awake. And that happens because when you're not wanting to sleep, you're not trying to sleep, it becomes easy. When you want to sleep, when you try to sleep, that desire to sleep makes it impossible, right? So how do you get past that? Well, no quick answer, no easy answer, but really, actually, I would say everything I talk about here is to get past that. But things like, the classic things, let's spend a little bit of time here going over kind of the basic techniques, spending less time in bed, getting up early, let's say get up 6 a.m. every single day, being very, very strict about that. Going to bed maybe 6.5 hours before that or something. So let's say get up at 6 every day. Don't go to bed before 11:30. Build a strong sleep drive. Stay active and awake during the day. Have a strong, your body needs that strong sleep drive and need to sleep at night. Shift attention away from sleep. Do things that you enjoy. Do things that you thought you couldn't do because you don't have good sleep. That's perfect to just find that reserve within you and do it. All those things are really helpful. And so that was a little bit like CBT in a nutshell. Hope this helps, Carolina, and please comment again if you have any other questions. We had a comment from Michael Green. It wasn't not really a question, but more a comment. Really nice hearing from you, Mike. And then here was the other one on a comment on insomnia number 52, also on jerky body movements. And it's, where is this? Oh, here it says, it's from Renando, saying, I'm suffering this at present, please help me. And I would just want to say that, for anyone that has a health concern, you have to talk to your doctor. And I don't, there's not too much content here from Renando, but I want to say the following, that hypnic jerks, which are like these, you're about to fall asleep and your body kind of jerks, is benign. It is, it's not harmful. It is, most people have them at some point. But again, if you're hyper aroused, if you're a little bit anxious, worried, they tend to happen more, and particularly when you get worried about them, that's when they really happen a lot. Good things that we already mentioned is that typically, in my experience, it's rare that they become chronic. They usually happen over a stretch of weeks or maybe months, but typically they kind of burn out. Again, the less attention you pay to these things like twitches and jerks and things like that, typically the less of them you get. And again, shifting attention is not easy, but finding, shifting attention typically is like the best thing to do. So Renando, I hope this quick answer was helpful to you. And Please let me know if you have any other questions. And then we had the one from Gabriella, and I think those were the comments. Now, before we leave comments from the YouTube channel, I'm going to look on my phone here at a different way of looking at comments to make sure I didn't miss anything, which I did last time. So we have this from 6 days ago. We talked about that. We talked about this. We talked about that. We talked about this. And yeah, I think that covered everything. Cool. Let's go over to some emails. We will start with this one. And it's from 6 days ago from Joe. And Joe writes the following. Hi, Daniel. Really enjoying your videos. I hope you might get a chance to address my question. I have terrible insomnia. Very sorry to hear this, Joe. For over 2 years now, I've not been able to sleep for more than 3 hours a night, often much less. This is every single night. I don't think I'm anxious, but this has been the cause of depression, and at times I felt like I'm in hell, and I don't know how I'll carry on. It's exacerbated by the fact that I have ME/CSF. I meant to look up ME, but I know CFS is chronic fatigue syndrome. This means that I blame my insomnia for my illness, or at least perpetuating my illness. And in fact, I've convinced myself that it's part of the illness and something neurological is going on. I have very little trouble falling asleep. It's staying asleep I can't do. I'm completely wide awake after 1 to 3 hours. Once in a blue moon, I might get 4 hours solid sleep. I hear people's complaints of insomnia, and I would kill to have their problem of having good nights and bad nights. So above I said I'm not an anxious person. I don't feel like I am, but sleep is the only thing I think about ever. One of the items on the long list of symptoms for ME/CFS is disturbed sleep. So I guess that does feed anxiety. It's a perfect storm, I guess. We go to bed earlier because we're so incredibly fatigued, yet we don't sleep. Until recently, I pretty much never felt sleepy. I've tried CBTI again and again, and I'm currently restarting sleep restriction again now. I've had to stop previously due to fatigue symptoms becoming too severe. It seems I have to really punish my body and suffer so much if I want my sleep to improve. But I know CBTI is my only hope. I cannot tolerate sleep meds, and my experience with beta blockers has given me a phobia of medicines anyway. Please, can you reassure me with success stories for people who have very short sleep durations? Are we hyperaroused? What advice can you give to people who have ME/CFS or other conditions which can perhaps ease us into the sleep restriction side a bit more gently? Yeah, I think I have some things to share here. First of all, thanks for reaching out, Joe. I say this quite often, but questions, comments, emails are really what gives this channel life. It's so important to be able to talk about real questions like these ones. Now, first of all, many things here. I don't think I'm anxious, as we already talked about in this episode, and you bring up this too. You said I don't think I'm anxious. That said, sleep is the only thing I think about ever. That tells us a lot. You're not frankly worried, anxious, but you are preoccupied, hyper-aroused. You think about it all the time, So yeah, I think when somebody tells me I sleep 1 to 3 hours, and particularly if they tell me I'm not particularly sleepy during the day, and it's kind of bizarre, hyperarousal is the first thing that comes to my mind for sure. Now, so that was one thing. And then you described a lot of things very well about how with insomnia you're so incredibly fatigued, you go to bed maybe earlier than you should, and then that doesn't give you any better sleep. In fact, it's worse, and then you become more fatigued, etc. Absolutely, that happens. Now, actually, let's just move on to the questions here. Can you assure me with success stories? I'm using this example a lot, but it is Ellen who I read a comment from earlier. And I can't remember the episodes now, but if you go through all the episodes where Ellen is featured, you can go all the way back to the first ever email I got from her. But where I think why I bring up her so much is that she felt like she didn't sleep at all for like 48 hours and typically slept 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, like that. And she had insomnia for about a year. And initially also said she said like, she didn't have so much the chronic fatigue that you have, Joe, but she had a little bit of the opposite. In fact, like she didn't feel tired at all. It was very bizarre to her. But as she progressed, working with CBTI, she realized that she was pretty hyper aroused. And now the success story part about this is that she went from estimating 0 to 2 hours to now sleeping typically like 6 hours. She describes herself as not a fantastic sleeper, but she's not that worried about her sleep. She sleeps pretty good, and she's like you said, Joe, you would probably kill to sleep like her, right? So I think that's a real good success story that is pertinent to this very short sleep duration. Absolutely. Are we hyperaroused? I think the quick answer is yes. Now, here are a couple of things. What advice do you give people who have chronic fatigue syndrome, which can ease us into sleep restriction side? I think here's the thing. I believe in sleep, what's unfortunately called sleep restriction, what I call bedtime restriction. And what I just saw this very quick little side note here. I saw this poster when I was traveling this past days, which there was something about like advertising for Delta, I think, or some airline. And they said something about sleep tight. And I thought, like, why don't we call it sleep tight instead of like sleep restriction? Sleep tight. It's more positive. So maybe I'm going to start calling it sleep tight. Anyway, how can you do this technique, bedtime restriction or sleep tight, in a more gentle way? Well, in fact, I feel like you can get past insomnia even without doing it, just by exploring kind of your beliefs and working on that. But it's hard. It's hard if you're not limiting time in bed, I believe. I believe a combination of like the cognitive part and the behavioral part is best. Now, but here's where I'm going with this. Often when people do this bedtime restriction, it's very focused on like, it's very strict and rigid and very short. Like you should spend like 5.5 hours in bed, not more. I don't believe that always is the best thing to do. I think it is good to have a time where you try to get out of bed in the morning and be pretty consistent with that. But it doesn't have to be. You could start with 7.5 hours. Which with classic CBTI, people will be like, well, this person is only sleeping 3 or 4 hours. This person needs a really tight sleep. And I don't think so. I think the consistency is something more. Doability. Like if you choose a sleep window that is doable, 7.5 hours, and you can commit to that, I think that's much more important than having a tight sleep window that is almost impossible. So that's number one. I hope that can, ease you into sleep restriction. Another way of doing bedtime restriction or sleep restriction is like to have an even wider window, but stop watching the time at some point. So let's say you get up at 7 and then 10 p.m. you just like, I'm not going to watch, I'm going to be unaware of what time it is from 10 p.m. and on, and just have an alarm clock at 7. That I learned that technique from Michael Schwartz. He calls it like ditch the clock. I believe it's really good. And I feel like to finish off here, I think what you identified is extremely important. Sleep is the only thing I think about ever. If you could change that, I believe you would take a huge step in the right direction. And how do you do that? No easy way, but I think the key is finding something that is exciting and fun and you enjoy. If you have time on your hands, it could be like a huge undertaking. It could be like learn to play the piano or, something like that. If you don't have as much time, it could just be little things like I'm going to, learn how to make a new dish every other day, or whatever it is, something that takes attention away from sleep. I think that could be big. That could be really, really helpful. Joe, please, send me more questions as they come along, and I hope this was helpful to you. And then let's see here. Oh yeah. This is, I got an email from, let's see, Sugata. And I want to say that if, I get a lot of emails that are long, but this was really, really long, and I don't really know how to best answer this. So if you could just like maybe try to make a little kind of a condense it a little bit, I promise you I will reply. With that said, I think those were the emails there, and 2 more things here. Let's actually let me bring up my phone here, and I think this is important here. First, okay. So this one, Shaden, who had been doing so well, and I talked about that, I believe, last week, sent me a message Thursday, a couple days ago. Hey Daniel, hope all is well. So the evil insomnia monster came back. I'm afraid of flying and get anxiety around traveling. So the day I booked my tickets, insomnia came back. One night I woke up at 1 and wide awake and filled with anxiety. I was unable to fall back asleep and only got 3 hours of sleep that night. Now it feels like I'm back in that cycle of having lost my sleep confidence. It's 3 a.m. and I cannot go back to sleep. What would you do in my anxiety-induced insomnia? Thank you again. So a couple of things. First of all, very sorry this happened, but not unexpected at all. Once you've, somebody that has never had any trouble sleeping doesn't necessarily react with insomnia so much when they're stressed. But once you've had insomnia, particularly for recently, then it's almost a little bit like PTSD. Like a lot of things can trigger that insomnia again. Now, here's what's important, I think, is that when there's a clearly identifiable reason, then guess what? Anyone actually would sleep less if they are afraid of flying and they're going to fly. That's completely normal. Now, if you had trouble sleeping, particularly recently, then that reaction can become exaggerated. Also, completely expected. So I think, as I've said many times, and I think actually very much in context of like answering comments or emails or messages from Shaden, the best thing to do is not react. And I think some things that make it maybe easier not to react here is that there's a clear reason. We know why this is happening, and also that there's been so much success from in Shaden's case with not reacting, just keep going with the CBTI, what Shaden was doing, and finally here, I believe that the more times you get past an episode of not sleeping, if it's a night or several nights, if it's getting past that by not reacting, by sticking to your sleep times, getting up in the morning, going through your day, not going to bed too early, not sleeping during the day, the stronger you become. It builds that more than anything, really, getting past a night or a couple of nights of sleeping very little just by kind of sticking to the program, that shows you that you can. You've already done it twice. The next time, if you kind of use this to build your sleep confidence, it's going to get easier and easier until until it doesn't happen again. Shaden, hope this helps, and and stay in touch. Hope your flight went really well. And that said, a few more things here. Jay, who has contributed a lot to this channel, Sent a message Sunday, so that must have been yesterday. Hey, I was wondering, I know chronic insomnia is when it lasts long, but they say it's either trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. I'm wondering if chronic insomnia can be both. Absolutely. Chronic insomnia is typically both trouble falling asleep and staying asleep. Yes. I've looked at some of your videos and the web, and it doesn't really say much about that I have trouble getting to sleep and I wake up in the middle of the night and can't go back to sleep. Last night I did sleep for 4 hours, but I was up for a while and I woke up in the middle of the night. Well, that, what you described there sounds very, very typical for insomnia and chronic insomnia. And chronic insomnia just means that somebody has a hard time sleeping for more than three months. And but this highlights something that's really important. I think this is the first time I'm saying this in this episode, which is like, the more we are able to think of our trouble sleeping as typical, as common, and as similar to those other people have, the less mystery around it, the better. Because mystery always tends to make us think, what is going on? Why is this happening? I have to look here, and try this and this and that. And when we say like, oh, I have the same type of trouble sleeping that everybody else has, then there's less mystery, less searching, more belief and commitment to CBTI or other behavioral techniques that can really, really help. And so I hope this was helpful to you, Jay. And I think there is one more. Yeah, here it is. One more email that we shall go over right now. Dear Daniel, I'm sure this is one of many thousands of emails that flood your inbox most days from the sleep deprived, me included. I know one thing that many insomniacs say is that they've tried everything but nothing works. So I wanted to share my experience and less altruistically seek your advice, which I guess is a slightly different take on that. I've tried a number of approaches: CBTI, sleep restriction, ACT, the effortless sleep method, medication, or just good old-fashioned booze. And I generally find, whether chemical or psychological, they tend to be pretty effective initially, some for longer than others. But eventually, I always seem to fall back into a bad run. With drugs, I think this is well known, and there are clear physiological and psychological reasons for this. With therapeutic approaches, I think, for me at least, it boils down to 3 related things. Probably nothing you haven't heard before, I know. But number 1, obsessive thoughts. Even when sleeping well, I find it very difficult to stop obsessing about sleep. Sometimes the better I'm doing, the worse it gets. I feel I got more to lose. Yeah, that's very, very insightful. I've tried both blocking and accepting thought, but I haven't found anything that's particularly effective here. Number 2, sabotage. I find a particular sabotaging tendency to my thought process, almost searching for ways to break or disprove any new method that I'm trying. Very, very interesting. And I have some comments on this. Number 3, belief. When I have hope and belief in a new approach, I can generally sleep well from virtually the first night. But when bad nights happen, particularly if there's no obvious reason, I quickly start to doubt the method. And even if I'm sticking to its principles, it seems to quickly undermine its effectiveness. As a result, I feel I'm constantly stuck in cycles of struggle and hope with sleep. Better than just struggle, I guess, but I obviously like to escape this for good. Any advice would be incredibly welcome. Thanks, Pete, for reaching out. And I had this, since reading this a couple hours ago, this is one I felt most important thing that I want to share right away before it escapes my mind is this. I feel that one of the most important things, and I just actually talked about this a few seconds ago, but one of the most important things in kind of getting past insomnia indefinitely, is to go through a period of really little sleep and come back using a particular technique. So the key is actually like those episodes where you try something and then it seems like it's not working anymore and you're having like your stomach comes back. That is actually very, very important. That is, you need that. You need to get through a period of insomnia and go back again using a technique for it to become effective. Because then you've seen not only that it kind of like the initial hope and belief in it helped you, but also the technique itself carried you past a stretch of of insomnia, that's when sleep confidence starts to build. What I hear, like the overall picture of this is, and I'm sure you agree with me, is that, you said it yourself, is like anything works if you believe in it. If you believe that, ginkgo biloba is going to help you sleep, and that kind of takes away some anxiety, and you feel like this is going to help me, and you believe in it, it will help until you start questioning it, right? And that's the proof that you don't really have sleep confidence. There's always that doubt: is this going to work or isn't it going to work? And that doubt can trigger that insomnia again. So I think, let's talk about CBTI, because that's what I'm most familiar with, and I believe it is the best approach. In fact, I believe that a combination is the best. It's CBT plus mindfulness plus sleep. You can combine those into something that's even better than CBTI itself. But sticking with CBTI, let's say you decide that I'm going to spend 7 hours in bed, do the sleep restriction, but let's not forget the C is super important too. Learning about sleep physiology and learning about sleep efforts, learning about sleep drive is just as important as spending less time in bed. But let's say you decide I'm going to do CBTI, and you start that, and you have this okay, it's helping me, I'm sleeping better, and then that doubt kicks in, and then you start sleeping worse again. Well, that's when the real work begins. That's when you have to really do nothing. That's when you're like, okay, I'm not sleeping good. I'm not going to react to it. I'm not going to change anything. I'm not going to change my technique, my approach, anything. I'm just going to do exactly what I've been doing. I'm going to get up the same time. I'm not going to get to bed too early. I'm not going to try anything new. I'm going to keep doing whatever I enjoy during the day. I'm not going to let insomnia take anything away from me, and keep going. And a day might pass, 2 days, 3 nights, 4 nights, but at some point, there's going to be a change. There's going to be a glimmer of hope. There's going to be that time 8 days later when you're like, whoa, I actually fell back asleep pretty good. And that's when sleep confidence starts to grow again, because then you've seen that by just sticking to what you did, by using these behavioral and educational techniques, you started to sleep better again by just keep going, but just keeping going. Then you start believing, and when you've done that when you cycle through maybe a couple of times where you made a dip and a comeback, that's when strong sleep confidence comes in, and and you stop cycling. Then you get back to regularly good sleep. Now, how are we on time? I think these three, there's so much to talk about here. Let's just try to get some real insights in here. Obsessive thoughts. I've tried blocking and accepting thoughts. I find that there's no way to control thoughts or block them. I think the key becomes distraction. The key becomes finding something that you really enjoy, particularly close to bedtime. I've been really talking a lot about this lately. The hour before bedtime or so, watch a Netflix show, watch some TV, call a friend, do something you enjoy there, to really try to keep thoughts away from sleep by doing something else that you enjoy. I think that's the key. Not blocking or accepting can work, but that's difficult. But blocking is hard. Distracting them, like going into a different direction, I think is really key. Sabotage. This is a really interesting one, and I think it just shows that part of your brain is looking for a reason to abandon a technique. So let's say you do CBTI, part of your brain is looking for a reason it's not going to work, and it's logical, it's trial and error, because typically when we try to solve a problem, the quicker we abandon a strategy that's not working, the quicker we find that one that's working. So I believe that's why a lot of people kind of try to sabotage it, try to look for reasons it's not working. But with insomnia, that's not a good strategy, because the sooner we abandon a strategy, the longer it takes for us to get better. It's actually sticking to it despite these voices that is the key. And then belief we've already talked a lot about that. So Pete, this is really, I really enjoyed answering this email. A lot of good questions, and I hope this helps. Please stay in touch, and anybody here, like any follow-up questions or comments are really helpful. With that said, I will conclude for today. I have lots of things to talk about this week, and next I'm planning to do a next episode like this one, answering questions on Thursday. So please hit me up with some questions, and I'll get back to you then. So that said, be well, and my email is daniel@insomniainsight.co, and I will be back here as mentioned tomorrow. By the way, if anybody wants to work with me as a coach and as an iPhone, please check out Bedtime with a Y on the App Store. Android, it's going to be out probably November, December, maybe later. We'll see, but it's coming, and hopefully you won't need it at that time, but it's coming there too. So that said, I will conclude here, and thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll be back tomorrow. Until then, stay out of trouble.